Hey folks, and welcome to the Deconstructor of Fun podcast. I'm your host, Michail Katkoff, and in this episode, I'm joined by two fantastic guests. Returning guest, Moritz Bayer-Lenz, partner at Lightspeed Ventures, and Kieran Donovan, founder of Kyid. Now in this podcast, we'll first dive into Kieran's diverse career journey from a screenwriter to a lawyer, actually from a lawyer to a screenwriter to back to a lawyer, and now a very successful startup founder just 10 months in. We're going to learn about what is Kyid, a pioneering platform for creating safe online gaming experiences for youth. And of course, if you look at the title of this podcast, they raised $51 million in 9 months. So very interesting journey. In this podcast, we'll have the discussion that cover funding stages of a startup, the complexities of gaming regulation, the critical importance of building a robust solution for youth online safety. What you will walk out of this is hopefully insights into venture capital dynamics, the strategic decision that lead to attracting top-tier investors like Lightspeed Ventures, A16Z, Convoy, and Turda, all among investors in Kyid. Now, if you like this podcast, I suggest you subscribe to this podcast, whatever platform you're using. I also suggest that you subscribe to our newsletter, link in the description below, and leave a comment or join the conversation on the Deconstructor of Fun Slack channel, along with about 3,000 game industry professionals. You can access the Slack channel by going to deconstructoroffun.com, and I'm sure you'll find the link somewhere there. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Kieran Donovan and Moritz Bayer-Lenz. You've heard of heroic labs by now, and we keep talking about them because in today's mature market, you need every edge to be successful. Rather than spending those precious company dollars on building game tech, focus on building your game and shipping it. Get into your players' hands faster and grow your community. Heroic Labs is battle-tested partner and friend of the podcast. Their tech enables you to be flexible, creative, and scale for success. Heroic Labs has your tech stack covered. Whether you're looking for a world-class back-end game server, an amazing game development framework, fantastic live ops tooling, or reliable mass scalability, Heroic Labs has solutions for all of these challenges. And it's not just us at Deconstructor of Fun praising Heroic Labs. The company works with some of the world's biggest publishers on many of the beloved games. Focus on your game, save a big chunk of cheese, and avoid tech risks with Heroic Labs. Hello and welcome to the podcast. We got two fantastic guests as always. So let's start with the returning guest, Mr. Moritz Bayer-Lenz, partner at Lightspeed Ventures. Moritz, good night. I believe it's pretty late with you right now.
It is. I apologize in advance if I make even less sense than usual.
Well, first of all, congratulations on your newborn. And this should be normal for you to be up at crazy hours, so we don't feel too bad about it. It's just a part of the gig. And we have another very, very interesting guest. So Kieran Donovan, I'm just going to go quickly through your resume because it's very interesting before I let you go. You're an Aussie that started as a screenwriter in New York. Then you were a lawyer in Sydney, London, Hong Kong, became a partner at lawyer company. Then you founded a startup, which is currently in Singapore, where you're right now. And 9 months into your startup, you had 3 funding rounds with total funding of $51 million. Seems like you've had 3 different careers in a short span of time. When I'm looking at the video, you look like you're about 27, 28. A bit of a wonder child. So Kieran, it's a pleasure. Welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here. That's the shortest version of that story.
Well, before we jump in and talk about Kyid, give me a little bit of a longer version.
Yeah, so you're right. I've been a lawyer my whole career for the last 14 years, and I had a little bit of a side quest before that, where after I finished law school, I decided that I didn't want to be a lawyer. And so after interning at a number of law firms, I decided I would jump ship, fly to the US, and live the dream writing for TV and film. So there was a little bit of that. By the end of a year, I'd run out of money, and so I needed to call the law firms back up and ask for a job again. and so kicked off the legal journey. So yeah, I've done an orbit of the planet as a lawyer, and then that naturally led into Kyid, which is what I'm doing now.
So being a lawyer naturally led into startups. That's not a natural progression, just like a screenwriter to a lawyer is also not a maybe it is. You're kind of like writing fiction, making others believe it. That sounds like what lawyers sometimes do. That's true.
There's definitely creative elements to it. I'd say it feels like there's been that consistent thread throughout my whole career, which is solving creative problems.
Yeah. Okay, so we're here to talk about Kyid, and you just raised your Series A. So how large was the Series A?
It's just over 45 million.
That's a serious Series A. So for folks listening to this more, correct me if I'm wrong. The way it goes is you have a pre-seed sometimes early on, which it means that you have a good team, you're working on something very interesting, so you get investors to put in some money so you can focus fully on the idea that you're working on. Then you have the seed round, which is you've built something that has early promise. It could be a prototype. It could be even in some closed markets. It's in testing. It's showing traction that you're heading towards that's something interesting, and you get a funding. And then you get Series A, which means you have serious traction and you're giving money to fully attack the market. Am I correct to kind of summarize it this way?
I think it sounds good. I mean, the way we think about the Series A versus the seed is it's no longer just a team and a concept, but there are these first signals of product market fit. And so I think in the case of Kyid, and we'll get into that, there's been quite significant traction, even though since I believe the pre-seed is only about 10 months ago now. To Kieran's defense, he was planning to raise maybe half the round when this all kicked off, and so this is not him getting greedy or telling the story. This is almost investors all wanting a piece of the pie, and so a big function of that was also having two firms who are really digging into the Series A and contributing equally. The other investor that we should name is Andreessen Horowitz, who shouldered this Series A together with us. And there's also participation from other well-known gaming funds, including Convoy and Tirta and strategic investors here.
Awesome. So Lightspeed and A16Z, that's a mega win and mega pressure that you're putting yourself on, because now you're on that $10 billion train that you need to hit. So let's talk about Kyid. Like, what is it first? And then I'm going to talk about what makes you such an amazing fundraiser. So let's start off with Kyid. Why? What?
Cool.
What made you do it? Just wherever you want to, which point ever you want to start up.
Yeah, so I do say that there's this common thread throughout my career, because it did feel like it was this natural extension of what I was doing as an attorney that then led into Kyid. And I was doing a ton of work for game publishers globally on how do you launch a game in 100 countries or 150 countries. When you've got loot boxes and chat and you've got advertising, you've got all these different functions and features, and you need to localize it in different ways around the world. That's a hugely complex thing to do, and as you can see, because you just keep reading about it every day, there's more and more complexity being added every day. So I'd seen the increasing level of complexity, and so it felt like a couple of years ago that there was an opportunity for someone to skate where the puck was going and build an infrastructure that would deliver the answers that were being provided by lawyers and engineers manually, traditionally. And there was an opportunity to build something pretty special. So that's sort of like, it rolled very much as a natural extension of what I was already helping game publishers with. And when you see the opportunity to build one common framework for everyone and solve a lot of challenges at the same time, it's a really compelling thing. Eventually became so compelling that I couldn't quite convince myself that staying in law was the right idea and that I should go and build it.
So there was a market demand, and you saw it in your day-to-day job, and you saw that you can build a scalable solution to tackle this market demand, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Those are just like hardcore motivations to solve this problem.
It was seeing the opportunity, but also seeing the two different versions of the future. one of them was I had a great career. Loved the firm I was working at, great clients, loved doing all the work with game publishers. And so I was very happy continuing to do that. But as an industry, the risk was that everyone was going to try and solve these problems in a different way. And so from a user experience, you think about, like, I'm a parent. For me, as with my kids signing up to online games, me going through like family experiences, all of that, I don't want to deal with 40 different versions of that or 100 different versions of that every time that I'm signing up or my kids are signing up. What I want is one to go through one process. Like, that's the best user experience you can have. But if I was kind of to continue doing what I was doing, then there was the risk that everyone would try and reinvent the wheel over and over and over again when it came to youth online to try and deal with all these challenging questions. But there was an alternate version of the future where someone looked a few years ahead and went, okay, well, what if we built an infrastructure that would deliver all of the answers that are required when you're dealing with youth coming into any online platform, particularly gaming, and we do that for everyone, all at once, globally. And that vision of the future means there's a consistent, unified user experience. It means you don't need to go through verification over and over and over again. It means you can centrally manage games. It's just a way better vision of the future. It's a much more compelling thing, just as a dad. And so, you wake up one day and you think, let's do it. Let's build it.
I mean, we can relate, sure, on this podcast. Like, your priorities change quite a bit, at least with most people when they have kids. How about this part? As a parent, starting a startup, how did you, discuss that with your, because you're in a ripe age. Like I said, 26, but you can add 10 to that, and you have a partner that you probably have to discuss these things, because startup is not a solo journey. You have to have the backup at home. How did you go through that decision? Because it's a lot of work, and the ups and downs of your company are your emotional ups and downs. At least that was my experience. I'm sure you're much more mature and that won't affect you in that same way. So how did you make that call? This podcast is brought to you by Appsflyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful. It's essential. Enter Appsflyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With Appsflyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they interact with your app. Appsflyer, where your app's potential meets performance.
The reaction from my wife was, she thought this was a really interesting side hustle, and then it hit that inflection point, particularly when we raised our pre-seed round, that it suddenly occurred to her that I was about to turn my back on my career and go and throw it all in on the startup, which was definitely an interesting conversation. And I can tell you that I was in the US, I was traveling, I was pitching VCs, we raised our pre-seed check, and within the space of 3 days I had resigned from the firm and was on the journey. And I called my wife at some point in those 3 days to tell her about the decision that I was about to make. And I said, we can take our time thinking about it. And then 24 hours later, we were on the phone again. And I said, I have to do this. I have to do this. I can't not do it. And I probably should have waited until I was back in Singapore to actually have that conversation in person than do it remotely. But to her credit, she had seen how excited I was getting and how passionate I was getting working on this over the prior year. And she'd seen all the late nights, the early mornings, everything that was being built, and all I think the momentum she could see that was building, and that I just had my spark back. That was, she could see that this was something, that this was not work. This was something that was more than that.
And your founding team, it's you. Do you have your co-founders, or like what did the early stages look like? And then I have some questions for Moritz.
So the initial founding team was myself and Timothy Ma, who's head of the privacy team at Tencent. So obviously one of the biggest game publishers in the world. And he and I have been buddies for almost a decade. We worked together for a long, long time. And we were out go-karting one night, and in between rounds, we'd been talking about the complexity of kids regulation and everything that was happening. And, gosh, it seems like someone should try and solve this. Like, this is something that's really expensive and challenging. And we just looked at each other. And we're hyper competitive, so we were going around and we were racing these go-karts and within fractions of a second of each other. And then in between rounds, we would have this sidebar talking about what the world could look like if someone built this technology. And by the end of the night, and Tim won, and he reminds me of that all the time, that we should do this. We should give it a go. And then spent 6 months ideating on it. And as part of that journey, we brought in co-founders who filled a specific gap in our knowledge. One was trust and safety. You can't do kids online without trust and safety. And so Jeff had been an early hire at Google in 2003, had built out trust and safety in the very early days before it was called trust and safety, and then did the same thing at Facebook. And then we had Julian who joined, who had run a game publisher. He'd been at Take-Two Interactive. So between us, we had all these different skill sets, and yet the Venn diagrams connected in the middle where we had all orbited the kids issue at some point.
That's awesome. So it's like this is the maturity part, because normally the way it happens is you have that emotional yes, and then you start pitching and going, and encountering the problems. But what you did is you had that emotional yes, super excitement, but then you took half a year of really not only ideating, but planning and building the core team before starting to get the traction. So you didn't have to kind of, build the first part of the plane while jumping off. So that's a very important learning experience for anybody who's planning to do a startup. Is just when you get that rush, hold on, plan, really think about it, make your core team solid, and then go pitching, because you can only make the first impression, the first pitch once. So,
Totally.
That makes sense. Moritz, I wanted to ask you, a ripe age of a founder, a good founding team, how do you make investments decisions in Series A? And also, does an age of a founder, what type of a role does it play? Because you have invested in companies where the founders were 20-something, probably 30-something, probably 40. There might be stats. I've seen some stats with the founder's age and correlation to success, and how does this play out? It's an interesting topic.
We actually looked, I think, about a year ago at just statistical profiles of successful founders in multi-billion-dollar companies across the different domains that we cover in as part of our consumer sector, including gaming and entertainment, but also other domains, like commerce, marketplaces, and creator economy. And I believe that for gaming and entertainment, the median age of what made a multi-billion outcome was actually the lowest. It was in the high 20s on average. So if anything, in gaming, it skews younger. I don't think about it much. Funny enough, I only found out about the ages as part of the confirmatory legal diligence. So it's not like we dig into this stuff. We might be 10 years off sometimes by perception, and I think that's totally fine. It matters maybe a little bit more for the studios. At least that's what I tell myself. I think on average, the founders I've been backing are standout designers and producers on the studio side that have a demonstrated track record of pretty scaled commercial success. And that's how I've been picking my studio teams, as you know, and as others maybe have observed. But I think for something that's more akin to a platform, a technology company that's trying to disrupt the status quo, this investment here, Kyid, rhymes a lot more with what is a traditional VC opportunity in software, SaaS software. And so I think on average, you'll probably skew a little bit younger in the 20s and 30s rather than backing an experienced designer or producer who's in their 40s. But frankly, we don't think about age too much. So what was the main driver here? It was commercial traction. It was which publishers were interested here, how many of them, and also then the caliber of the individual contracts, the scale of the contracts, and how quickly they came together. Really from, I think, 0 million ARR or contracted ARR just maybe even 6 months ago, to where things are standing now. I'll let Kieran decide how much he wants to disclose and any names he wants to mention there, or maybe that's reserved for a later podcast. But yeah, I mean, while this is, it's beautiful to find something that also does good, and I think that makes this investment extra special. I don't want to beat around the bush. Like we're not investing because we feel good about this. We get excited, and especially at the scale here, because of the commercial traction with the publishers. So I think probably should talk a little bit about that too, and why this syndicate built such conviction at this point in time.
So what I was trying to kind of get through more is there's a lot of notion of how much intangible elements there are when making an investment decision, and people are like, well, I didn't get invested because X, Y, and Z. But you're basically saying that really it's all about the traction, it's all about the metrics. We don't look at other elements that are like, of course you look at the background of the person and the track record and so forth, but you don't look that much on the demographic side. You look at the traction elements, right?
I would say for Series A, I mean, when we do these early stage investments in seed, or if we're talking about a game studio that's still pre-launch, we're basically using team caliber, pedigree, where they've worked, but more importantly also what roles they've really held at certain companies, at certain games. We use those as a proxy to predict future traction and maybe outsmart other investors who are not going as deep on the diligence on the founding team. But when it comes to a Series A or Series B for a platform or technology company, you're usually well at a point where this is no longer just a bet on the team. The team continues to be important because, frankly, at a Series A, it's still primarily a bet on the capabilities of the founding team. Like when Kyid goes public in 5 years, like what are the chances that it looks materially different from how it looks today or how it looked in the pitch? Pretty high, right? So first and foremost, we still need to find people who can navigate the inevitable, probably 2 or 3 heavy pivots that will happen even in the next 5 years. But for a round like this to come together and, more or less double in size during the process of the race, and like for all these dynamics to happen, that's usually a function of hard metrics and traction. And so when we look at rounds of this size, especially for a platform or technology company, it really rhymes with traditional VC investing. It's less speculative. It's pretty mechanical. And I think also an important point here, if you visit the Kyid website, I think this will look like, a nice, good to have, maybe a bit cute tool for parents, their kids, their teens, to really design age-appropriate gaming and online experiences. There is another side to this, which I think is actually the driver of the traction, is this is also a really important tool for all publishers to have, right? On their side, and there's a few things that changed in the market here as well. As if you look back just 2 years ago, pre-2022, I think there were a collective $200 million in fines or so paid for violating age-appropriate gaming experiences. And if you look at even just 23 and after, we're talking about more than 2 billion. So just the last 2 years were 10x in fees and violations than up to that time. And so there's clearly something changing in the market. The regulators are coming down on AAA publishers. Epic Games has been in the news specifically, I think, with now over $1.5 billion in fines. I mean, I'm sure Kieran has all these numbers at the top of his head, but from a publisher perspective, there's also immense pressure, and more pressure than there ever was, to get these important topics right. And so they're looking at Kyid. They're seeing a solution that not only replaces what is currently done manually, idiosyncratically for every publisher, and in some cases for small studios and mid-sized studios, they can't even afford to have that 5-person legal team, or however that looks on average. They certainly also can't afford to make mistakes. They can't keep up with the 200 countries in which their game is published, which have daily, weekly changing regulations of what even constitutes youth. There's different understandings of what age is the right cutoff for certain things. Where does voice chat need to be standard, disabled, enabled? If people want to dig in, I think the Kyid website has reports that just show the complexity and also how quickly this landscape is changing all the time. So no one can afford to track all that. No one can afford to make mistakes, especially the big ones. So to have one technology that keeps track of it, that enables you to do it, and interestingly, because this is not only a unique team and a unique tech, it's also a unique legal setup that can provide publishers even a safe harbor. And Kieran should talk to that, because he's really the expert here. It's first and foremost a lecture in how powerful it is to have a real solution for a real problem. If there's a lot of these founder pitch templates that start with, okay, describe what your company do, what's the problem you're solving, what's the solution. This is there for a reason. Right? The reason this is getting the funding is because it has the traction, and the reason it has the traction is because it really solves a problem. There's really a big problem, and there's really a smart solution here. And that's probably like the one takeaway from a how to raise or how to pitch perspective, that this just nails spot on.
Step into the future of game monetization with Exola. Exola empowers developers and publishers to market, sell, connect, and optimize their games globally. From payment solution to a full suite of tools designed to grow your game's revenue while fostering a loyal player base. Exola is your game's gateway to worldwide success. With Exola, the world is your playground. Visit Exola.com today and find all the solutions that will help you to power your games into success everywhere. Yeah, thank you, Morris. That's really thorough. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that, Kieran, when you were first pitching this kind of came from left field to a lot of investors. Like they maybe didn't think that, because there's not a lot of companies that are doing the same, because normally you get the pitches that are like, hey, we're making the next mobile, and the next this, next that, and you kind of put it into the existing lockers of your understanding. But this is coming a little bit out of left field, like of the privacy regulation, you know all the elements, but now the founder is telling you something very unique, something that only you would know about the market, because you have been working as a lawyer there, and you can talk about the numbers, you can talk about the size of the problem and the size of the opportunity that you're solving. And then suddenly you see those clicking, and you become that unique person who nobody else is pitching this, and it makes all the sense. And that's how you got the traction. Am I kind of interpreting it correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, at least initially, VCs were very confused about why a lawyer was pitching them on a startup. And I think that was sort of the initial gut reaction. The second one was, well, you have so much conviction that you're willing to step away from partnership at a really successful law firm with a great practice and go and do this and place this bet on yourself. And the third thing was, I kept hearing over and over again, so this isn't AI.
Which gave us pause.
And I got asked. I did get a lot of questions, which were, so tell us how AI either tell us how AI is part of this, or tell us how AI is going to disrupt this. What is this a problem that could be solved with AI? And the great thing about a legal problem where the solution, to Moritz's point, that publishers are looking for is not just a technical solution, but something that actually solves for the regulatory risk, that big penalty, because they can go and build these things. Now, yes, it's hard to keep up to date, and it's better to have someone solely focused on it. But in theory and historically, that's what they've done. So you really have to solve the actual problem, which is, can I go to market in this country with my game, expand to a youth audience or a teen audience, and I'm not going to be taking on this huge amount of risk that you're reading about every day in the media, where there's huge fines being handed down, or bans, or all sorts of things that are being talked about.
And can you talk a little bit about the value proposition of KID? Because we talk now a lot about the publishers aspect. So there's a very clear value proposition there. Publishers are essentially, this is an insurance for publishers, and almost like, not even an insurance. It's how you should operate when you're expanding, especially across demographics and geographics. But what is the value proposition for the kids, for the parents? Like, how do you think about that? Because you kind of have to get both on board. Yes, publishers will need this, but you also need the people to sign up, because this is a service where you create your ID. And by creating that ID, it's, if I understand correctly, the kids or the parents create that ID for kids, and then they use that ID across different games. So you have to have the consumers actually wanting to do this. Otherwise, it's not enough that just publishers want to have this.
Absolutely. And there's a whole range of reasons that we've worked pretty hard on to make it compelling. Speed, obviously cross-platform, the ability to manage things centrally that are really fundamental. But here's the crux of it. 90% of the internet today is predicated on the basis that kids aren't there, which is why you see over and over again that pop-up that says, I confirm I'm over 13. And every kid knows exactly what to do when they see it. Every kid knows exactly what to do when they are asked to enter their date of birth. And this is a stat that I didn't know until recently, which is some of the research has shown that in more than 60% of cases, kids are lying about their age to go online with the help of their parents. And that's not because it's an experience or a space where the kid shouldn't be. It's because they want to be social with their friends. They want to game with their friends. They want to build their community and their identity online in a particular space where their friends are. And yet the first thing that they experience is a pop-up saying, I confirm I'm over 13. And the crazy part about that is that what the byproduct of that level of the internet is, we're teaching kids from a younger and younger age to lie. That's their first interaction with the internet, which is crazy, right? Like, okay, welcome to the internet. You can do all these things. And by the way, in order to do it, you're going to have to lie. And what we unlock is the ability to engage that youth audience, that 11-year-old, that 9-year-old that's going online, or that 15-year-old in some countries. When they're going online, you don't, as a platform, need to say, this is too risky and too complex, and therefore I'm going to say this is 13 and up, or this is 16 and up. You can say, no, I'm going to welcome the entire audience, including the youth audience, as part of this. And you as a 9-year-old, as 11-year-old, as 15-year-old are going on and saying, like, great, okay, this platform respects me for who I am and where I am, and now I can go online and I can build my community, I can build my identity online, and I'm not forced to become invisible. Because one of the big risks is, and we've seen this, which is once you go through that gate, if the platform discovers that you're under the age of 13, they have to kill your account. That could be years worth of progress or identity or social credit that you built up online with your friends, gone. And it's crazy that there isn't an alternative today. And that's what Kyid, the key value proposition is, well, you shouldn't live in fear that as soon as you get discovered for who you are, that your online, your account, your online identity is all of a sudden gone. There should be a space where you can actually be who you are. And if you're a kid, you're able to build a community with other kids. You're not forced into a world where you're speaking with strangers who could be, 3 or 4 times your age on the other side of the planet. But that's the way the world works today, and so we think there should be a better way.
And how is the Kyid, like, how does it work in practice? Like, can you walk us through the funnel?
Yeah, so if you are a game dev today and you want to launch a game in 100 countries, you log on to the Kyid developer portal, you select which markets you want to launch in, what platforms you want to be on, you configure the features that you have in your game. So if you have maybe paid loot boxes, or you have certain free-to-play aspects, maybe there's an ad network that you're integrating, you go through, you pick your features, you generate an API key, you put that in your game, and we'll handle the rest. So we will handle everything that needs to happen in terms of adjusting those features for any of the markets that you want to launch in. So, for example, if you're looking at Korea, where certain types of loot boxes are really sensitive from a regulatory perspective. So our system will make sure that if there are additional consents that are required, that goes through. In the US, for example, if you're a teenager, so you're between the ages of 13 and 17, you can chat with your friends, you can even chat with strangers, but you need to make sure as a game that chat's off by default to begin with. You don't just throw people into the chat network. So our system handles that and everything in between. So it'll handle all of that complexity. And then if you need to get a parent involved at any point to unlock more, then our system handles all of that as well.
I think one aspect to also understand is once a publisher or once a game onboards to Kyid, all users of that game will run through the Kyid pipe. If they're not kids and teens, they won't see the Kyid UX or interact with the platform in any meaningful way, but effectively a game is on or off Kyid. So that also is a massive onboarding opportunity for the platform.
Got it. And if I create this account for my 10-year-old, when my 10-year-old turns 13, 14, it automatically adjusts based on the age. So the game experience adjusts accordingly, right?
That's exactly right.
Got
it. It grows up with you.
This podcast is brought to you by Data AI. Now, you're asking, didn't they get acquired by Sensor Tower? They did, and that's awesome. Here's why. Whether you loved using Data.ai or Sensor Tower, the combined company will offer customers even stronger and more detailed insights on the full digital customer journey. Exciting times lie ahead as Sensor Tower and Data AI join forces. Go to data.ai or sensortower.com and get on board with undeniably the best data partner in the business. Now, back to the episode. Got it. So you don't have to manually do anything. It just remembers everything, and there's just more features. And of course, what's the business model of this? Like, it's a SaaS, and who's paying and what are they paying for?
Yeah, it's designed to be flexible in the sense that we want to be able to service the AAAs, and a lot of the traction we've had early is because a lot of the big AAA studios see this as a big problem and a big issue that they want to solve and they want to do right. But the mission we're on is that we want our kids to be able to benefit from this better way of doing things everywhere. And so in order to do that, it means that indies and AAs and everyone in between need to be part of the Kyid value proposition. And so if you're an indie, it's free. You can take exactly the same stack, integrate it into your game, and it's good to go. And you'll have all of the benefit of the ease of global go-to-market, being able to open up to a youth audience instantly. If you are more than certain, we have certain bands of users, but once you tick over a certain band of MAU, then there's a sliding scale in terms of cost. We keep it pretty simple and straightforward, so we want to make sure it's predictable for all the publishers that are integrating with us, so that it's the type of proposition where it's just going to solve so much and open so many opportunities that it's a no-brainer, and that's where we've made sure we keep the pricing model.
Got it. So basically, you make sure that you get as many clients as possible, but that your revenue scales with the success of your clients.
Exactly.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Moritz, how does this investment fit into Lightspeed's gaming fund? So you are running pretty significant size of a fund, and when looking at the annual Invest Game stats, you're the one with the biggest checks to the biggest name to all the AAA studios coming in from LA. This is a very different play. How did you approach this? The investment thesis, and how does this play out? Like, of course, all the scenarios have been made.
I think actually about 8% of our dollars have gone to LA. So we maybe have to fight a market misperception here. But it's a fair push. I think the one name that comes to mind, which was my first investment after joining Lightspeed, was the Believer team, which is like, I think people looked at this and like, okay, it's a very credentialed team, former producers of League of Legends and Wild Rift, based in LA. How do you get like such a round together? What's the rationale here? But I think in my own defense, that might be the only one that fits that stereotype of combination of location and pedigree. So people want to get hung up on that, and then that's their choice. But the way I think about this and the narrative you'll see us use on the website and everything we do in the programs we run, like Game Changers, and the type of events we organize, even with the CEO forum at GDC, the one common thread that runs through everything, and I love to reiterate over and over again, is that we want to work with extraordinary founders. And that's the gist. I spend most of my time on early stage investing. I do some growth stage investing. I love the early stage work a lot more. And that like 9 out of 10 investments will be investments because truly of the, I don't know, about 2,000 things or so I look at in a given year, I say these are the 2 or 3 investment opportunities this year where this team and this opportunity are truly so extraordinary that I won't be able to sleep at night if we don't partner up. And Kieran will smile. Like we had our first call arguably late. So I think I missed a lot of the initial Kyid traction all through March. They had a big splash at GDC. We only met in April, a week after my daughter was born. It was the first call I took coming out of the hospital. It was during my parental leave. And the running gag at Lightspeed was that I wasn't taking my parental leave, and instead I was working on a deal immediately. But I told people it's parenting related, so it should be covered under the agreement. But we had our first call, and it was the 11th hour, to say the least, to start conversations. And I think we barely had a day or two in 4 or 5 weeks where we didn't talk for an hour or so, and it was a pretty short, intense romance. And I always told Kieran we'd be able to figure this out, and I think it died like 3 times. And there's a lot of tenacity involved. And like I'll be honest. I thought for most of the time of April and May that this wouldn't work out, but I also couldn't live with the fact that it wouldn't work out, and I really wanted this to work out. And so honestly, like, to have that energy and tenacity while you really should focus on other stuff, it's one of these things that are special in a given year. And so I had actually not sent a term sheet in 8 months or so. That also feels weird, to sit on your hands for such a long time. But if we try and come out as a firm per partner at like 2-3 high conviction bets per year, that's not super unusual. But it also feels amazing to find something that you really want to pursue this much. So it comes to show what I think, is the right bar to hold yourself to when you're really trying to back generational companies, and how that feels like from the investor perspective. And so I think even in the month now that we've spent on the same side of the table, after like two months on opposite sides of the table, it's been a very productive month on many fronts. Hopefully Kieran will feel the same. But yeah, I'm happy to talk more about how this fits into Lightspeed more broadly. But I want to pause here too, because I can see you're smiling, so you probably already have some follow-up questions.
No, it's there's some typical aspects of it, and thanks for clearing out the LA perception. but there's some aspects to it, like coming in on the 11th hour, so that means Kieran had a good amount of FOMO. Probably A16Z was pretty far off at that point, and that gives you more reassurance because they do a great due diligence as well. That this is something tangible, something you need to really figure out if you want to be in and out. And Kieran, you have two very different investors in Lightspeed and A16Z. Well, A16Z does a lot of volume, of course, with the speed run and the amount of investments, and like combined 1.2 billion in gaming is perhaps the biggest gaming fund at the moment if you combine Fund 1, Fund 2. And then you have Lightspeed that is incredibly selective, almost at benchmark level selective, maybe not quite like you do. Benchmark is like one deal per partner. Here you have like 2 to 3, but almost as selective, where the term sheets are hard to get, and you really have to win more, it's over. So how does working with these two, like of course you have full board now, but how does working with your new board after the investment?
I think I knew exactly what it would look like because, to Moritz's point, we spent so much time together trying to find a way to make it work and get a deal done. I think one of the unique things for us is we were able to bring together those two dynamics that you've pretty well articulated. We've been super intentional about investors that we've brought on. When we brought on Convoy as they led our seed round, it was very focused on who can help us price gaming infrastructure SaaS as fast as possible, because we had clients banging down our door saying, hey, how is it ready? Can we use it? And we were still trying to figure out how to price it. And the Convoy team had done so much work in that space. So they were able to give us really highly targeted support. And that's exactly what we were hoping for when we sort of put the word out about the seed round. And in Andreessen and Lightspeed, I mean, that was my wish list, was that we were able to do something where we could get them both together to help push Kyid forward for different reasons. I think, the A16Z team is fantastic. They've been super supportive of us, and there's been some helpful go-to-market opportunities that have accelerated us. I think the exciting thing when Moritz and I started talking was he really got the value proposition straight away, and he was very quickly, at least this is my read of it, Moritz can correct me if I'm wrong, but very quickly understood and was educated on how complex the problem was and why this was a unique solution. I keep a spreadsheet so I can follow up with people, but I had 98 funds reach out after we announced the GDC, and I kept detailed notes on each of them, like what was the value prop, everything from where were they based, what was the value prop, what were the specific connects or introductions that they felt would be meaningful, all of that. And what Moritz brought was just, it was a tab of its own, with all of the really specific and thoughtful go-to-market. It was a standout. So bringing those two investors together, so Andreessen and Lightspeed, for those very different reasons, and the support that were very different, and the Venn diagram was quite unique, was what was exciting for me.
And we're also tapping into collective energies from both funds just to get the word out about Kyid. I think go-to-market was one area where collectively we're making introductions to the CEOs or presidents or the legal departments of a lot of the big names in gaming. But by the way, also beyond gaming, right? This is already also a play for other media and then also consumer apps. But yeah, I think this is recorded before the press release. But by the time it comes out, hopefully there are a few high-profile outlets that have put out the word about Kyid, not just as a report about the fundraising and the amount and all that good stuff, but really educating the market that this platform exists, why it matters, how it works, and also telling a story about why this team is uniquely capable to address this problem and actually has built something very, very special that I believe is also extremely hard to replicate. And so I think we go out often to approach outlets with a story, and I think this is something that has been picked up by not just an exceptional amount, but also by certain names that are a lot harder to get to. I mean, Kieran and the team were also just named technology pioneers by the World Economic Forum. Like, it takes a bit for a Series A company to get that recognition and get noticed on that global scale. And I think, I'm honored to be a part of this. I'm really excited to see where we can take it. And I'm also truly glad to be on the same side of the table with Kieran, because it's not fun to be on the other side. After so many years as a lawyer, he's a tough negotiator, And I always thought I was good at it, but I got schooled at least a couple of times.
Well, that's awesome. And I wanted to, like you mentioned Convoy a couple of times, I want to give a shout out to Convoy Ventures. They're fantastic, especially at seed rounds and especially with tools, tech, and platforms. So that must have been a great help as you were gearing up for your Series A. So it's as part of the testament, not only what you've built and the traction you've had, but also the probably the support from Convoy to get such a huge FOMO for what you're doing, and testament to the fund that when they're recommending you to the next founders, the next funds, then that immediately gets serious traction. So just credit where credit is due. So Kieran, you have fantastic investors. 10 months in, you've raised tremendous amount of money. You're on a very positive mission that people are excited and are happy to back. And you're on a trajectory that is, has to be on quantum scaling, like you can't do anything else. So when you have both Lightspeed and A16Zs that have to return their $1 billion funds at a 5x minimum. So what does it look from this point on to, let's say, like a next year or two? Because you're sitting on all the cash, on all the resources, on all the connections. You're gonna fly to Davos, like you're as connected. You're gonna be on every single game. Like, tell me a little bit about the next couple of years and what we'll be hearing about Kyid.
I think what's super exciting. So I'll say one thing first up, which is when it came to speaking to investors, and when it comes to speaking to publishers, when it comes to speaking to partners. And now when we're speaking to social networks and online video and others that exist beyond the gaming space, the phrase that I hear over and over again is, I am a parent. Within the first couple of minutes, you articulate what Kyid is trying to do. And there is a pain point, not just on a business level, but at a personal level. And so I think the macro piece for us is very much the hundreds of people that I've met who've articulated and recognized this is a personal issue for me. Being able to walk into a room a year from now and say, hey, we're Kyid, and have someone react with, oh, great. That's what's solving all these issues online when it comes to kids and teens. That's kind of the exciting personal motivation for me, is to get to that point where I feel like that paradigm shift has been pushed over that inflection point. You're right that there's a lot of pressure on us, and mostly pressure we put on ourselves to build something that's going to be meaningful and change the way that kids go online today, because we do strongly believe that the ways of thinking about kids online is so imbued with the environment of the mid-1990s that there needs to be a shift. And that means that we need to do a fantastic job in gaming and build better gaming experiences and unlock more for kids and teens today than what they have. And then we need to take that same philosophy and the technology that we built and affect that paradigm shift in other verticals. And social is one, online video is another, and there are a number of others where we've been approached by a lot of indies and larger players about helping support different ways of different modalities in a way in terms of building products. And some of these are brand new. Some of these haven't even gone to market, but the way that they're thinking about the DNA of their product and how it needs to deal with kids and teens is now part of the thinking. This isn't like a pivot and, how do we deal with the kids issue? This is, we are building a social network and we want to think about kids day one. So being part of that is going to be pretty exciting. And then, the sky's the limit. I think we're going to build some pretty exciting infrastructure that's going to unlock a lot. And we get asked to do a lot of things. We say no a lot, so we can stay focused. But, I'd love to say yes. I'd love, the new shiny object where that sounds like a great idea. Let's try that out. So I'd love to be able to explore more of those problems that you can start to solve once you've built the foundation to solve the kids piece.
Well, can't wait to follow the story. I'm sure you've already, like all the publishers, all the big ones are working with you and are going to come out with an announcement in the coming weeks and rolling out this service. Seems like a very important service these days. And I'm also acknowledging that it's almost 2 a.m. where Moritz is at. So Moritz, kudos to you. Like, look at this investor. He's through thick and thin. No matter what time it is, he'll jump on your side and and support. So kudos to Moritz. And Kieran, have a great rest of the day, and let's catch up when the product is scaling and you enter that next stage, that Series C, heading towards the IPO. And Moritz, have a great night.
I probably will. It will be short, and starting with moderating a panel in about 5 hours here at AWE. So it's but this is still a lot better hours than Kieran is working on a regular basis. So.
Moritz knows that he usually can call me, and whether it's 1, 3, 5, or 7 a.m.
Yeah.
I will answer.
Yes, scheduling this podcast was extremely easy because apparently you two work 24/7. So you were just like, just send us a time, whatever fits you. So that works. But thank you so much, and fascinating to hear about the founding story. I hope people found it useful to understand how these type of rounds are getting made, how to approach it, and in your case, like how to be diligent, how to start the company, press pause when needed, how to, what type of funds you want to work with, because it's very important that you do the selection correctly and not just jump with anybody, but actually think about how well you fit at an early stage, at a following stage, and doing your due diligence, and especially when you get that FOMO and you have 98 funds wanting to work with you, and you're able to like, hey, hold on, and then really interview and think about how well you gel with those funds. This is a very mature way of building a business through very solid partnerships, and not just focusing on one aspect of the business and forgetting about everything else, and kind of building this gel team. So Kieran, clearly you are a very mature founder. Even at a first take, it's you're better than 99.9% already. So nice path.
Yeah, great to chat about it. Really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, have a great rest of the day and the beginning of the day. So bye-bye everybody, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.